plot. There was an evil. Well, see, there's no real villain in Bring It On, and everybody had a plot. There was a villain. She was removed, but because Isis and Torrance are not. She's not a villain in the contemporary sense. She's been wronged. I mean, there's been a wrong that needs to be righted. So there wasn't a bad guy, and that's really unusual for a high school movie to not have an over. We made, the football players who made fun of the cheerleaders, and we had some kind of stereotypical. The dance guy's kind of a bad guy. Yeah, the choreographer Sparky Pilastri. He's a bit of a bad guy, but yeah, there were no real bad guys. So there was a bad guy, and she was, in the world of cheerleading, there are many divisions in this world. And my obsession, do you want to talk about co-ed, large varsity co-ed? Do you want to talk about, all girl? Do you want to talk about pom? Do you want to talk about dance? There are all these different divisions, or prop. Did you know about prop cheer? Did anybody know about prop competitions? Thank you. So there was and in schools where there's a dominant cheerleading squad, the pom-pom squad, or song leading as it's called in the West Coast, is usually somewhat diminished. So anyway, there was a storyline about Pam Ann, who was the head of the pom squad, who was always, correcting the spelling. People were always saying pom-pom, and it's pom-pon, and, was very much the villain in the movie, and there wasn't time to do that, and we didn't need it, and it was too broad. It just was one of those broad things. It's like Sparky was enough broad in the movie. Ultimately didn't need it. And she came out, that storyline came out pretty, I'd say a year into development. She was gone.
But I think that one other thing that's interesting about that, though, is that Jessica always said to me when I was working with her on my movie was that, and it's actually, I think Hemingway had a quote that said, if the whole shark is there, all you have to do is show the fin. I believe that was Hemingway. But the idea that it was all there before means it can be cut out, and the feeling of it is still actually kind of in the movie. And you hope that the stuff that you really, really need isn't what ends up getting cut out. Sometimes that happens in movies, and then your movie ends up sucking. But for some people, not me. But no, you hope that it's there, because if it's there and you cut it, somehow the rest of the movie, it still feels like it's there. There's enough there that you feel that stuff that was taken out. Because you know it, and you know what's beneath it.
Yeah, and then there's stuff that gets taken out, and it just sucks. And then you see a bloody fin above the water. A bloody hacked fin.
It's sad.
A sliver of its former self.
Do you want to talk about Shadow?
I want to talk about actually another way I help get into character, if anybody cares. It says at the bottom thing is about pattern adoption and the quadrinity model. Another lens of perception that I like to use when thinking about characters is the quadrinity. I'll do the pie. There's a pen.
Hello.
I love a pen.
Visual aid.
Is the idea, that we're primarily 4 parts. I mean, we're more than that. But, mind, body, emotions, spirit. That's kind of a classic model of how people are. You also can say intellect, emotion, intellect, heart, physical. And this is always kind of called spiritual. Or there isn't another word for that necessarily. And so sometimes when I'm struggling with a character, I try to think, what is the percentage of the pie? So say a character is 99% intellectual. It's all intellect. That's going to impact these other areas. Body, spirit, and emotion. Somebody who's a nerd, who is all mind and working at the computer and not eating and living off of Slim Jims and Diet Cokes and not caring about his environment because he doesn't care about his physical space and hasn't had time for love because he's only been applauded for his mental prowess, right? That person is going to be very different constitutionally than somebody who is all spiritual and, all love and all, peace. So sometimes it's a fun, crude thing to put over your character and say, what percentage are they? Are they balanced? I mean, your character shouldn't be balanced. You generally balance, as I said, I think balanced characters are boring. You want them to move on a spectrum from, some negative end of the spectrum to a positive result. But it's good to know where they are on this. Is your character all, body, that glutton thing we were talking about, somebody who's all physical, all sex, all eating, all sensory overload, to the extent that they're, stuffing down their emotions or not thinking about things or ignoring their spirit. It's an interesting thing to play with, and you'll get a lot of surprising answers. What I also love about it is it's a great way to do shows instead of tells with your character. If you have a character that's all body, those are great things to put in your description. You don't even have to announce it. You just show it. They're eating all the time. Or they're constantly futzing with their clothes, or they're constantly checking out how they look. They're constantly twirling their hair. Somebody who's very body obsessed, for better or for worse, those are great things to show that you don't have to explain necessarily, but it's feeding you. Again, the nerd, I love the nerd example because it's a cliche that isn't often explored as deeply as it can be. I mean, that's a really painful thing when somebody's all mind and they've let their body language and their heart and soul. You know, we all know people like that. It's really sad. So that's another lens of perception I encourage you to look at. And there's a thing online that I give you. There's another theory of how patterns form in people that I really like. That's good for thinking about your characters. They say there are 3 ways that patterns form in people. You either adopt the pattern, meaning your mom does something, therefore you do something. You rebel against the pattern, therefore your mom is good, so you decide to be bad. Or you're in a push-pull, which is what most people are. They're in a push-pull with whatever they learned. It's, again, a great way to think about your characters. How did they become the way they were? Was mom nice, therefore they're nice? Did dad abuse them, therefore, they're really rebellious and angry? What were the patterns that went on before page 1? And yeah.
I was thinking also, just because we've talked a lot about character, and many of you might be wondering sort of how do you take character and then get to what is my big idea that I'm going to write my script about. And I think, really good advice about like don't chase the market and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, you do need an idea or a world that you're setting your character in that's compelling enough that you're going to be able to sell it, I suppose. So do you have any sort of tricks for starting with character and then how you get to the idea of what the movie's about ultimately?
I think I go world.
Yeah.
I go world first. So there is a little misdirect in all this, the character emphasis for Bring It On. I was obsessed with cheerleading. So I started with the world of cheerleading and I started asking what if questions. What if the greatest squad in the history of cheerleading competitions had found out, she found out that the routines were stolen. What if and I like to do the kind of two great tastes that taste great together hybrids, like put things that have never been together and ask those questions. So what could be less, white than hip hop? So what happens if you put hip hop and cheerleading together? What happens if you put, it was originally based on Mater Dei High School, Catholic high school in Orange County. What if you put Mater Dei High School with Compton, in East Compton High, as we ended up calling it? It was originally Inglewood High. Which we couldn't clear. What if you put these things together? What happens when you start putting these ideas together? So the world, again, the world of gymnastics, a very regimented world. What happens if you drop Avril Lavigne into the middle of the most regimented sport in America? What happens? What if? And I just start trying to put these different tastes together that don't go together and see what happens. And then once I kind of have the world and I kind of have the energy of what it's going to be, then I go to character. Okay. But then character is plot, and you have to. But I like to find a world to live in first. But that's harder with genre. It's harder when it's a rom-com or a thriller. It's harder to do that. Got nothing.
We have questions. We got lots. Question. Woohoo.
Sorry. You've written film and TV. Do you apply your film rules to your TV stuff as well, or do you find there's not enough time to?
I don't write. I haven't written TV since Sex and the City. I did one. No, that's not true. I wrote one pilot. Super. It's a really good pilot, by the way. It's called Super. I think you always I always think you bring your muscle tone, whatever you're good at, to whatever you're doing at the time. I think TV, going on a show that had 3 seasons previous, there's a lot that's been formed already. So you're stepping into existing characters. That's a different skill set. But you're trying to put them in new situations and make it interesting and exciting and, And also season 3, the end of Sex and the City. I don't know if people remember, but that season 3 ended with some transvestites on a rooftop, and it got a lot of criticism. So coming in on season 4 was definitely trying to course correct the show and ground it. And it everybody's like, oh, it's all gay men writing the show, and blah blah. And so that was an interesting time to come on the show because they really needed to change it up a little bit.